guys, this is Orumus, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about penetration in World of Tanks, how it works, and maybe after this video's done you'll have a better understanding of why sometimes you bounce rounds and sometimes they penetrate and no damage. Anyway, let's get going. So I'm going to use the KV-1 as the example tank, just because I've been using that in the other videos, so why not? The first thing that I want to point out is every single gun in the game has penetration values that you probably have seen now. For example, this one, the penetration, it says is 112, 189, and 29. And those three different numbers are for the different ammunition types the tank can use. So 112 average penetration for armor-piercing rounds, a 189 average penetration for armor-piercing composite rigid, and 29 average penetration for the HE, or high explosive rounds. Now, that isn't a guaranteed penetration. That is its average penetration, and what I mean by that is World of Tanks has RNG. By now you probably know all about RNG, or you've heard about it at least. RNG adds a bit of randomness to a lot of different aspects of the game to kind of be similar to real-life situations. And one of the things that RNG affects is penetration. Every round has their average, which in this case we'll talk about AP, 112. But that isn't the whole story. The penetration can be plus or minus 25% of that. In other words, if you look at the ammunition itself, then you know what the very lowest penetration is and the very highest penetration. So the very lowest penetration is 84 millimeters of penetration, and the highest is 140. And what happens is every time that you shoot your gun, the game, think of it like virtual dice, kind of rolls those dice, and it's on those dice you've got numbers between 84 and 140. And it rolls it every time that you shoot, and up comes how much penetration that round is going to have at 100 meters or less. And I specify at 100 meters or less because a lot of rounds, AP and APCR, lose penetration over distances over 100 meters. I'm sorry. AP loses a minor amount of penetration. Some tanks, it's about 5 to 8%, depending on how far the round travels out to 750 meters. APCR loses a lot of penetration, a lot more compared to AP. Some tanks, like the Lectractor, it can lose up to 60% of its penetration at maximum range. So anyway, the point is that you know, you got to understand that the penetration number that you see on your gun is the average penetration. Sometimes you can be shooting at a tank that you know has very little armor, and you'll bounce, and you'll say, "Oh, how did I bounce?" And a lot of times that can be because you've got a low roll on your penetration value. And the other thing that you have to understand is that depending on the angling of the armor that you're shooting at, if it is straight at you, 90 degrees, then whatever value their armor is, say 100 millimeters, then that's all you have to penetrate, 100 millimeters. And more than likely, you know, this standard 112 pen round, you have a good chance of penetrating it. If, however, they are angled, then it increases the effective amount of armor that you have to penetrate, which is why, if possible, you want to avoid shooting at heavily angled armor with vehicles. A good thing to know in World of Tanks is, by default, there is the cursor. When you go to aim on a tank, has three different indicators. The color of the cursor when you are or the color of the aim reticle when you are aimed at a tank gives you a general idea about your chances of penetration in this game. Green means more than likely you're going to penetrate, orange means it's iffy, and red means pretty much no chance in hell you're going to penetrate. So don't take those orange and red shots, you know, because more than likely you're not going to do anything, and you may just, you know, reveal your position or get the enemy to focus on you. So just keep that in mind. That's in the game. That's a basic option. Next, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the different ammunition types. Right now, there is 4 ammunition types in the game. Or, I'm sorry, there's 5. There is AP, which is armor piercing. There's APCR, which is armor piercing composite rigid. There's HE, which is high explosive. And then there is heat, which is high explosive anti-tank, like this right here. And then there is HESH, and right now only British tanks have HESH. For example, the Death Star, as some people call it. Its premium rounds are HESH right there. And HESH is basically HE, just a higher penetration version of it. Now, the reason I bring your attention to these different ammunition types is because they have different mechanics depending on the type of shell that you are firing. AP has what's called shell normalization, up to 5 degrees worth. So what that means is if you are shooting at angled armor, then when the shell contacts the armor, it will negate approximately 5 degrees worth of that angling. The tip of the shell will bite into the armor, and then the momentum will cock the shell 5 degrees towards a more 90 degree angle. Obviously, it won't hit 90 degrees if the armor is more than 5 degrees angled at you. And then it will continue penetrating through with whatever penetrating value you had. So that's actually good, because negating 5% or 5 degrees of angling, hey, that's good. That's less armor you have to penetrate. APCR will negate up to 2 degrees. It has 2 degrees of normalization. Heat, HE, and HESH have no normalization at all. However, I did mention earlier that AP and APCR suffer from lessening armor penetration over distances over 100 meters. Heat, HESH, and HE have no penalty. So it doesn't matter if you're shooting at 80 meters or 300 meters. Heat, HESH, and HE still have whatever penetration value you rolled when you first shot your gun, whereas AP and APCR will lose some penetration after 100 meters. Also of note, HE and HESH have a splash radius. As you can see right there, it calls it burst radius. And basically, that is, if you hit a target or miss a target, hit the ground, whatever, then the game calculates a circle of that radius. So in the case of the HESH that the Death Star fires, a 5.05 meter radius around the impact area. And damage will be applied to any other vehicles in that radius. So say, for example, that you're shooting at an enemy and you hit right next to him. Well, just like HE trying to penetrate armor, your damage, because you didn't penetrate anything, you're exploding in the air. 50% of the damage that you would have done, and just like, real quick, just like with the penetration values, the game does a roll when you first fire your gun for damage as well. As you can see in the case of this shell, the damage is between 1,313 damage and 2,188 damage. So when it rolls those virtual dice, it decides, okay, you're gonna do 2,000 damage in this shot. If you miss your target and you hit the ground or whatever, then it figures out the damage. Immediately, 50% of the damage that you rolled is gone. So from 2,000 to 1,000. And then it has to do the armor penetration calculations the same as if HE hits tank. And the way that works is, with an HE shell, if you hit a tank, then HE has penetration just like AP or APCR. As we can see here, the penetration is between 69 and 115. We'll use the number 100 just because it's nice and easy in round. So let's say you roll a 100 for the penetration value on this HE shell. And let's say you're shooting at a tank that has effectively 200 millimeters of armor facing you. Well, when your shell hits, it's going to negate 100 millimeters of that 200 millimeters of armor. Then 50% of your damage, like I said before with the blast on the ground or missing, is negated completely. So let's say you still rolled 2,000 damage. So 1,000 is gone out the door immediately. Then the game takes the remaining amount of armor, which is 100 millimeters, multiplies it by 1.2, so 120 millimeters, and then subtracts that from the remaining damage that you have. So you had 1,000 damage left, you subtract 120, and you get the 880 damage that you would do to a tank. And it's the same thing if you miss a tank, but they are still within your blast radius, then there is no penetration value, obviously, because the shell didn't hit them. So it still has to calculate that however much armor times 1.2 subtracted from your damage, and then that's whatever's left is how much damage you do to the tank. And that's how HE and HESH, because HESH is just a high penetration version of HE, works. That's why a lot of times, for example, artillery, this is a T92, a lot of people, they won't hit you directly, but it still will do a damage to you. If you've ever played in a tier 10 match, you'll know that T92s have ridiculous splash radius. As you can see, it's almost 12 meters. It's very large. But even lower tier artillery, like this GW Panther, has a splash radius, 5.11 meters. And if you're within that, then they're still going to do some damage to you, just not as much as if they had to directly hit you. Now, when we're talking about penetration, the other thing to talk about, we already talked about angled armor, and how if you angle your armor, then you are increasing the effective thickness versus anyone who tries to shoot you, which is why if you've ever heard the term side scraping, the reason why you bounce off or you do no damage to that tank's side when you shoot at it, even though you know that their side probably has very little armor, is because at such extreme angles, when somebody is side scraping, they are either increasing the effective thickness by so much, up to almost 300%, believe it or not, when you angle it between 65 and 70 degrees, to the point where it actually is considered an auto bounce. Anything 70 degrees or more in this game is considered an auto bounce. And then the only thing that you have left to shoot at on that tank, if they are side scraping correctly, is, usually people that are side scraping have a very strong turret. And, you try to penetrate that, and the armor's very thick, and you can't do it. The other thing that you may have noticed shooting at some tanks, sometimes you'll get the message, that you penetrated, but you didn't do any damage. So what happened there? Some tanks have spaced armor. Actually, a lot of tanks have spaced armor in different locations. A good example of this is Russian tanks. The IS-3, the IS, a lot of different Russian tanks, IS-7, IS-4, German tanks, E-100, the Maus, E-75, and lots of other tanks. There's tons of them, the Super Pershing. They have spaced armor, and what that means is literally a plate of armor, usually thinner than the primary armor, and it's layered over the primary armor, and there's like a little bit of space in between the two, hence the term spaced armor. And what happens is your round normalizes on that first armor plate, penetrates it, and then it has to do another armor normalization calculation in that space, and it's already lost a whole lot of penetration going through the first plate. And then whatever penetration is left, it will try to normalize again, losing some momentum to that on the armor plate behind it, and then try to penetrate. So a lot of times when you hear penetration sound but no damage, that's what's going on. You hit spaced armor and you penetrated it at first plate, but you didn't penetrate the inner plate, so you did no damage to the tank. Also of note, and this is very important, tracks on a tank are considered spaced armor. So try not to shoot tracks unless you are purposely trying to track somebody, or if you have to shoot them in the track, try to shoot them in the track wheel, specifically drive wheels or carrier wheels, so that not only will you track them, but you will also do damage to them. The other thing is that heat, HE, and HESH are terrible against spaced armor. Absolutely terrible. Heat is the premium round for a lot of tanks, even though when you look at it, it has a lot of penetration. A great example would be the T-54, Tier 9 Russian medium tank. Okay, with the normal round, on this gun, it has an average of about 201 millimeters of penetration. And that doesn't seem like a lot for a tier 9 tank, especially when you can see tier 10s, and it's not really. However, its premium round is heat, with 330 average pen. That's pretty good. The problem is that a lot of higher tier tanks have spaced armor, and when you're driving a tank like this and your premium round is heat, a lot of times, even though it seems like it has much more penetration, it's better to use the AP because it has a better chance of going through. For example, IS-4s and IS-7s have a lot of spaced armor on the side of their tank. So even though the side of the tank is very thin armor-wise, your heat round more than likely will not penetrate the tank because that first round of armor almost completely negates its penetrative capabilities, whereas your AP will go through it like it's nothing. So that's just something to keep in mind as you go through World of Tanks and you get higher tier and your guns, have different types of premium rounds or whatever. Just because you are loading gold, as they call it in the game, throwback to the day when it actually cost gold, doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to penetrate somebody. You need to be conscious of the tank that you're fighting and your own tank's capabilities, the ammo and everything like that. And when you do this, and when you get more used to it, you will become a better tanker. You will notice that you'll have more average damage, you'll have less penetrating, non-damaging hits, you'll have more penetrations. Knowing what your tank can do and knowing what the enemy tank can do is going to help you tremendously. Well guys, that's it. I hope this video helped. This is Orumus signing off.